The crux of the matter lies in how we understand the term Son of God and the questions that it poses about the relation of Jesus to the one whom he called Father. One may well ask whether the term, quote, Son of God is in and of itself a divine title at all. Certainly there are many instances in biblical language where it is definitely not a designation of deity. Adam is called the Son of God in Luke's genealogy of Jesus, Luke 3:38, Hosea 11 verse 1, which is cited in Matthew 2 verse 15, alludes to the nation of Israel as God's son. In Wisdom 2 verse 18, the righteous man is called God's son. Nathan's prophecy to David contains God's promise to David's successor. Quote, I will be his father, he shall be my son. 2 Samuel 7 verse 14, and compare with that Psalm 89 verses 26 and 27. This passage also occurs in a collection of testimonies at Qumran, 4q Flor 10 and following, indicating that the messianic significance of this prophecy was a matter of continuing speculation in first century Judaism. In Psalm 2 verse 7, the anointed king is addressed at his installation, and you'll find this quoted in Acts 13:33, Hebrews 1:5, Hebrews 5 verse 5. The application of Psalm 2:7 there is actually to the begetting of Jesus in Mary. You are my son, today I have begotten you, cited in Acts 13:33, and again in Hebrews 1 verses 5, Hebrews 5 verse 5, and compare with that 2 Peter 1:17. This passage is the source of the identification of Jesus with God's Son, Kol, or the voice from heaven, after his baptism. Mark 1 verse 11, Matthew 3 verse 17, Luke 3 verse 22, and compare with that John 1 verse 34. The voice also identifies Jesus with the chosen servant in whom God delights. This is found in Isaiah 42 verse 1, and compare also Matthew 12 verses 18 to 21. In the light of these passages, in their context, the title Son of God is not in itself a designation of personal deity or an expression of metaphysical distinctions within the Godhead. Indeed, to be a, quote, Son of God, one has to be a being who is not God. It's a designation for a creature indicating a special relationship with God, and in particular, it denotes God's representative, God's vice-regent. It's a designation of kingship, identifying the king as God's son. Therefore, I take the application of the title Son of God at Jesus' baptism to be an affirmation of Jesus as God's Son King in virtue of his anointing by the Spirit. Likewise, C.F.D. Moule comments on the trial scene. In Mark 14 verse 61, the high priest's words, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" are presumably understood by the evangelist as a question about a messianic claim. The title expresses the intimate relationship which Jesus had through the Spirit with the Father as the Father's anointed representative, which is depicted in the gospel narratives culminating in his death and the cry of dereliction, quote, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Matthew 27, verse 46, and Mark 15, verse 34. I believe that this is the meaning that we should attach to the term, quote, Son of God, at the beginning of Mark's Gospel, Mark 1, verse 1. Nor can we read the theology of later centuries into the testimony of the centurion at the foot of the cross. Quote, "Truly this man was a son of God," Mark 15, verse 39, Matthew 27, verse 54, and compare Luke chapter 23, verse 47. Certainly this man was innocent. In my view, the term Son of God ultimately converges on the term image of God, which is to be understood as God's representative, the one in whom God's Spirit dwells and who is given stewardship and authority to act on God's behalf. The designation of Jesus as, quote, Son of God in power, according to the Spirit of holiness, by his resurrection from the dead, in Romans 1, verse 4, is a reaffirmation of that Son kingship with divine authority, insofar as by the resurrection the Spirit has overturned the negative verdict of the Sanhedrin in condemning Jesus to death as a blasphemer who sought to lead Israel astray. It seems to me to be a fundamental mistake to treat statements in the fourth Gospel about the Son and his relationship with the Father as expressions of inner Trinitarian relationships. But this kind of systematic misreading of the fourth Gospel seems to underlie much of social Trinitarian thinking. Thus, statements like, quote, I and the Father are one, in John 10, verse 30, and those about the mutual indwelling of Jesus and the Father, in John 10, 38, John 14, 10 to 11, and verse 20, and John 17, verses 21 and 23, are taken by some to be statements about inner relations of the persons, so-called, of the Trinity. However, the fourth Gospel itself does not require such a reading. When read in context, these statements are evidently statements about Jesus' relationship with the Father on earth. It's a common but patent misreading of the opening of John's Gospel to read it as if it said, in the beginning was the Son, and the Son was with God, and the Son was God. John 1, verse 1. What has happened here is the substitution of Son for Word. The Greek, of course, there is logos. And thereby the Son is made a member of the Godhead which existed from the beginning. But if we follow carefully the thought of John's prologue, it is the Word that pre-existed eternally with God and is God.